Hello, I'm Thomas Hare, Chief Content Officer of the Performance-Driven Marketing Institute, a not-for-profit trade association that serves companies in the performance and direct-to-consumer marketing world. Welcome to the third event in our summer seminar series created by the PDMI's Workshop Council, AI and the Customer Experience. We welcome all of you to today's event, PDMI members and non-members alike. Speaking of membership, if you're not a PDMI member but are attending today, we'd love to have you consider joining. There's no better way to support the mission of the PDMI than joining and sharing your voice in the direction of the industry. In the handouts tab of your control panel, you'll find our PDMI membership brochure. I urge you to download it, flip through it, and contact any of our team members should you desire more information. Also, before we get to today's conversation, a housekeeping note. The group will be addressing any questions from the audience at the end of today's session, but you don't have to wait to ask them. Utilize the questions tab on your control panel to type and send your question in. We'll be collecting them and we'll try to get to as many as possible in the final moments of the webinar. Today, the PDMI's Workshop Council welcomes this group of performance marketing experts to its virtual stage. As the use of artificial intelligence grows in our marketing universe, how are consumers affected and what bumps in the road as well as glowing opportunities should you be aware of when it comes to your customer's experience? This group of leaders are prepared to weigh in on the positives and negatives of using AI in your marketing efforts today and in the future. They are Shai Bar-Ziv, Director of Business Development and Partnerships for Rapid Phone Center and a member of the PDMI Workshop Council. Linda Goldstein, who's joining us on audio today. Linda is a partner at Baker Hostetler and a member of the PDMI Government Affairs Council. Tim Shuvaloff, Chief Information Officer at PDMI member company DFO Global. And your moderator is Derric Haynie, Chief E-commerce Technologist at EcommerceTech. Thank you all for joining us, and Derric, please take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much for introducing us. Thank you for hosting us here. And yeah, Linda is here with us, but audio only, so you have to use your imagination, but we'll absolutely want to be listening up because she's the one that protects us all from making mistakes when it comes to implementing AI in our business. Before we get going, a little bit about me. I spend my entire business day life doing one of two things. I'm either researching e-commerce technology, literally in demos with tech products, or I'm talking to merchants about their tech stack and trying to help them understand what to do and implement in their business. That's enough about me. I'm just here to moderate. Let's have everyone give just a little bit more background on themselves, starting with Shai.
Yeah, hey everybody. Thank you for coming here and joining us today. And thank you to the PDMI for having me here. I'm the VP of Sales and Business Development at Rapid Phone Center, as was just mentioned. And my interaction with AI has been from a user perspective and from somebody who's using it and applying it currently at the center and some of the products that we have and services that we offer, and also for our own marketing initiatives within the call center. How do we promote our service online, and what are the ways in which other marketers are using artificial intelligence to reach customers, etc. So that's just a little bit about me. Thank you, Derric.
Awesome, love it. I'm looking forward to diving into this in just a second. Linda, give us your background.
Sure, I'm Linda Goldstein, and I chair the advertising, marketing, and digital media practice at Baker Hostetler, along with my partner Amy Mudge. And I've been working with the direct response industry for years. A lot of my practice is focused on defending clients before the FTC and state AGs in all areas relating to advertising, marketing, and especially today e-commerce. And AI, as you'll hear shortly, has come very much within the FTC's focus. So that's what I'll be focusing on today as well.
You're already scaring me. Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of this has to do with the way we collect, house, and then use data in ways that are, let's say, above bar, below bar, and everywhere in between, where there's a lot of gray areas and a lot of changing legal laws and legal constraints. Yeah. Awesome. And then Tim, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey guys, happy to be speaking today. I'm Tim. I started in performance marketing 7 years ago as a product manager. I've moved on to be Chief Information Officer at DFO Global Performance Commerce. Anything data related that goes through DFO goes through me in some way, shape, or form. I'm responsible for heading up all the AI initiatives that we have here at DFO. And yeah, just really excited to be talking about this topic.
Just to set the stage, you're too modest. DFO is like one of the largest and fastest growing, I would say, lesser known e-commerce names out there. You have a plethora of products, you've built your own technology, you have a lot of data to analyze. So I really look forward to diving into how you thought to apply AI and where to begin and where to end and all that stuff. So this is awesome. Yeah, great panelists and really looking forward to diving into it. Before we do, let me give you guys the overview on what I think of AI as it pertains to where we're at today and where we're going. You know, it's obviously, there's a bit of a buzzword. Pretty much all AI that we're using is probably just machine learning, which it's kind of a synonymous terminology, but we're moving towards, I don't know, what we might call truer AI or deeper learning kind of activities that resemble more artificial intelligence than just basic machine learning algorithms. I believe personally that in the next 10 to 15, maybe up to 20 years, we're going to see, you know, a revolutionary change in this industry where humans are being displaced by AI. You can think of coding can be displaced by AI. Customer service reps, as we'll talk to Shai, can be replaced by AI. Even marketers, email marketing, copywriters, content producers, a lot of things are starting to be displaced already. And I believe we're just at the tip of the iceberg. So there's so many different areas of the customer journey that we can walk through today, and we'll just try and tackle like a few big key points. But before I that's how I feel. But I'd love to just get a feel from you guys. What do you think the current state of AI is? Is this like just a new hot buzzword? Are we entering some sort of state of maturity? Are we bleeding edge? Are we, you know, like are we laggards if we haven't already joined? Just really quick, Shai, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what field of application AI is based on, right? Because you have things like Wall Street where AI has been used for the past 30 years, and they're definitely very advanced in the way they use AI. The AIs, you know, have gone way better since then, but they're definitely a long road ahead of us, let's say in the marketing side of things in terms of using AI. I think when you talk about AI for marketing and for advertising, I think it's still in pretty much its infancy. I think it's going to grow a lot, and they actually might transcend just digital marketing and enter offline products as well, like smart fridges, smart TVs, and things like that. So I think it really depends on the field. I think with respect to marketing and advertising, which I think is the domain of professional experience that the majority of people watching the webinar and part of the PDMI are, I think it's still in its infancy. There's a lot of room for opportunity, a lot of room for growth, and we're still going to see where this is going to take us. Yeah.
Infancy can be a double-edged sword, right? Because at one side, if you're an early adopter of successful technology, you could make a lot of money from it. And Tim, that's probably a little bit about what you're doing. At the other side of the things, you could spend a lot of time trying to implement a new system that never ends up paying off, or maybe you can't get adoption inside the organization in order to make it be as successful as it can. Linda, your thoughts on the state of AI as it is today?
So I would say, first of all, I don't think that this is a phase that we're coming out of. I think it's going to continue to grow. It may be in its infancy in marketing, but I think it is it's playing an increasingly significant role, particularly in targeted marketing and behavioral advertising, and I think it will continue to do so. I think it'll be interesting to see. I think the shift to first-party data with the elimination of cookies is going to necessitate even more growth in the use of AI for marketing. And I will say, just on a personal level, that you've talked about how it may replace lots of jobs in the advertising and marketing space, but we've actually been using AI in our law firm for about I would say close to 7 to 8 years now, and have actually automated a lot of our services as well. So we are not being spared the possible impact that AI may have on human interaction. We're seeing it in our own field as well.
All right, so there's a lot to touch on here. The first thing is that a law firm is using AI. So I think if we're in e-commerce, we're in business, and we're still not adopting some levers here to pull from, then we're clearly behind. And I would argue that, Linda, this is pretty innovative. I bet that if I go talk to 10 law firms, 9 of them are going to say, what you talking about? What do you think?
I think that's probably right. I think law firms have been late adopters, and the culture of some law firms will be to be very resistant, but there actually is a lot of opportunity to minimize costs and provide greater efficiencies to our clients through the use of AI, and that's pretty much what we've been focused on.
Now, before we finish up this question, you also talked about first-party data accelerating the encouraging the use of AI. I'd love for you to just elaborate on that a little bit. Like, what does it mean? So if we lose cookie data, we need to be using AI to harvest more of our own data. Is that kind of the gist of it, or I'm sure there's a little bit more there?
Yeah, I think that you know, with cookies, a lot of companies have been able to rely on the AI algorithms of third parties. If that goes away, you really need to, you know, figure out how to achieve those same results, particularly if you're talking about targeting and segmentation with your own data. So I think it will accelerate the use of AI within the industry.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you said, I think you kind of hinted at the idea that we're already being universally impacted by algorithms and AI in our Facebook feed, in our Google search results, and I'm sure in TV ads and thousands of other places, whereas consumers, we don't realize it. And so, yeah, as the larger conglomerates that are already doing this, as maybe they lose a little bit of control, as well as I would argue we're able to move down market because the cost of getting AI tools up and running has gone down to the smaller business. I think that in turn empowers what you're talking about here, which is leveraging our own data better. So let me turn to Tim. State of AI for you. Where is it at today? And I mean, you're building the tools. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to echo that it's not new at all. AI is everywhere, and most people are using it without knowing, right? I mean, if you're advertising online, you're invariably using AI at this point in time, through Google, through Taboola, through Facebook, and so forth. What's really kind of been the tipping point for me in the past 3 years is the democratization of AI.
Yeah.
So typically, you would really need, you know, quite hefty and talented staff to build anything, especially custom, because out-of-the-box solutions simply didn't exist at the time. Now there's a plethora of, you know, software that you can use, plugins for Shopify, for Zendesk, major out-of-the-box software that's really kind of brought AI to the table for a lot of parties that wouldn't usually be able to use it. So I really believe that, you know, in terms of the state of AI, you know, if you're a large organization, you should always be looking towards controlling your own data and building a lot of this stuff yourself, because control of your data is going to be very important in the future. It already is very important. But if you're a small organization, you know, if you're a few people, if you're selling some you know, products on Shopify, really you should be looking at out-of-the-box solutions and just seeing where you can kind of get advantages from. And that really requires you to go in your business, think about all the processes, and think about, hey, you know, where can AI potentially fit in here?
This kind of leads to the idea that collecting our data from day one is probably pretty important. And I know, you know, the larger the organization gets, the more important having your own data warehouse and like one source of truth is. But in the early days, we've got like, you know, disparate sources, and, you know, our emails over here and our SMS is over there, and our Shopify is in a third spot. So Tim, really quick, how do we consolidate, or is it just like a business intelligence tool, or when do we invest in the data warehouse, or maybe there's a simpler process?
Yeah, that's a really great question. As much as possible, I would definitely suggest building your own data warehouse, but I completely understand the challenges that most marketers face these days. I mean, we at DFO have hundreds of data sources that we have to consolidate, and that can be really, really time consuming. If you break out your business in terms of procedures, you may not need to do this in order to use AI, which is kind of my key here. So for example, if you're running e-commerce out of Shopify, yeah, maybe your SMSs live somewhere else. but think about how can AI be used for Shopify specific data? How can I use SMS specific data for something else? What consolidation will really allow you to do is to be better able to deploy quicker, but it's not a requirement, in my opinion. Not right now with how democratized everything is.
I got you. And we've already started talking about this, but just to be clear, I think you're all hinting at it, but let's see if we're all in an agreement here. It seems like AI is applicable across all businesses, large and small. Let's maybe put small at the, I don't know, $1 million mark. I think there is something to be said that below that, applications start to break down a little bit, where it's like, yeah, it could be beneficial, but it might not be as necessary. Whereas above that $1 million mark, it's like there's just a lot of money to be had. Where do you guys see the sweetest spot for an organization, if it is about like the revenue growth, or maybe it's just about something else? Where's that moment where it's like, this is something you have to seriously consider investing in? And Shai, I'll turn it to you first.
I mean, I don't know if I agree with the first part of that statement. I think that the application for AI is incredible regardless of the business size nowadays. I think you can be a very, very small, just starting out business, and let's say you're, a D2C advertiser in e-commerce. You can have hundreds of applications with AI, from an accounting applications to financial projections for your business, to copywriting for your advertisement. I mean, just endless, right? I think definitely the larger you scale the business, there are solutions that require artificial intelligence at a large scale that small businesses aren't even looking at because they're so expensive nowadays. But the way in which AI is growing, and I agree with Tim that something that's amazing that's happening now is that it's democratized. Not only like the use of AI, but a lot of AI builders are building it on open source code, which means that everybody can come in and edit the code and make it better, and that's the way we've gone so advanced with it. I think there's plugins at every level, but then I'll give you an example of a large business application which a lot of call centers are trying to develop, or a lot of conversational analytics providers are trying to develop, which is this new idea that within the customer service conversation, you can extract valuable marketing data.
Yeah.
And that's something that we hadn't sort of looked at before, because the technology didn't exist in a way in which it allowed you to create marketing, I wouldn't say predictions, but it allows you to have a larger, it allows you to have a new source for marketing attribution, which is that customer service conversation. If you're talking to customers about a product and they're running into the same problems, or they're using certain keywords that can be analyzed through natural language processing, and that can be sort of embedded into your advertising platforms, whatever they are, then you have an entirely new source of attribution that's first party, that's generated between a conversation between you and the customer, and the richness of the data is of a different quality. So one thing that I wanted to really enforce there is that something that we were talking about before is the data in itself, about having your own data warehouse. I think that's super important, not only for a legal reason, but just for the AI to work as best as possible, because the artificial intelligence engineering can be amazing, but if you feed it the wrong data, it's not going to do the things that you want it to do. So you have to make sure that you have good, rich data applicable to whatever function you're using your AI for. So that's crucial. I would say that's extremely crucial. That's why I think these, so first party interactions are so important.
This is amazing. I love it. And I'm thinking of the practical applications of getting this feedback. As I ran growth and marketing at an e-commerce company, and they had 80 customer service reps, and honestly, the data was siloed over there. I didn't know what the problems were. I met with the head of customer service, the director of customer service, once a week, and then they would come up and be like, oh, this discount code isn't working as expected, or this problem over here, we're getting a lot of returns with this product. It's like, I could have used that information 6 days ago before we sent this promo email. Like, you know what I mean? So I think that there's a lot that happens there.
There's a problem there as well with the sample size, and the fact that if you're just using human quality assurance supervision, that you're not going to be able to examine the entire entire set of data, right?
Yeah.
Like your quality assurance supervisors at call centers for customer service or sales, when they're trying to map out the reason, like the dispositions, and say like, you know, this discount code didn't work in a telemarketing campaign or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe they're just examining 5% of all calls, and that sample size might be very low. Whereas if you have AI to do that, then you can examine all the data and you can create, you know, through deep learning, you can sort of discover these patterns that are not necessarily very visible to the naked eye. So
yeah, and I think the humans
yeah,
overestimate the loud customers versus the actual like
absolutely. There's
revenue
so many
cost.
things going on there psychologically in that process that are definitely like I think QA supervision is going to be like the first thing to be targeted by AI, at least in the call center setting, because it's such an applicable field, you know.
Well, you touched on the risks of the data in. So Linda, I know you have a lot of concerns over AI. Your job is to keep people away from the FTC and defend them when they have to go in front of them. How have you seen AI discriminating against consumers, and what are some of the general concerns we should think about if we're looking to implement our own AI solutions or use, let's say, an out-of-the-box tool?
Sure. So I would say first and foremost, the use of AI in advertising and marketing is really at the top of the FTC's hit list right now. One of the commissioners, Commissioner Slaughter, has sort of made racial bias in marketing one of her key agenda items. And in connection with that, the FTC has already held a workshop on the use of AI in marketing, and they've issued 2 series of guidance for marketers. And probably the core element of what the FTC is concerned about is potential bias and discrimination against underserved communities or protected classes. So if the use of AI results in discrimination on the basis of race or gender, sex, or other protected classes, the FTC has flatly come out and said that will be considered a deceptive practice, and it will be considered a violation of the Federal Trade Commission Act. And in the marketing space in particular, they've cautioned that if you're targeting online ads on the basis of race, sex, gender, age, the result could be what they call digital redlining, meaning it is resulting in discriminatory or disparate treatment of customers based on some of these characteristics. And you know, it's interesting as we talk about probably the industry moving more to companies developing their own first-party data. The FTC is really warned now that businesses that use algorithms, they kind of need to start with the right foundation. So if you're building algorithms and data from particular population segments, for example, is missing, that may inadvertently yield discriminating results. And they've actually suggested to companies that before you make decisions, and they're talking particularly about marketing decisions, they've also talked about credit decisions and employment decisions, but in the case of marketing, that before you deploy algorithms and make marketing decisions on that basis, you should proactively check the algorithms before you use them to make sure that the use of those algorithms is not resulting inadvertently in potentially discriminatory outcomes. And they've also suggested that you have outside experts or independent experts look at your data and your source codes to determine if there are inherent biases. And they've come out and said basically that businesses are going to have to be accountable for the algorithms that they use. And if they're not accountable to themselves, then the FTC will make them accountable. So they have given so many signals that they are going to be looking at the use of AI very closely. And one of the primary areas of focus will be on whether there are inadvertent discriminatory biases against certain segments of the population. And where I think that can really get challenging for marketers is, particularly, in areas of programmatic or, targeted behavioral advertising. The data is being used to create audience segments. And if those segments are based on data that potentially, could result in some biases because you're factoring in age, you're factoring in gender, you're factoring in race. Those are the kinds of things that the FTC is going to take a very hard look at and is very focused on right now. There are other aspects relating to customer experience, but I know we'll get into that later. But I will say, when you think about starting to gather marketing data from customer service, as we just heard, that's going to create certain records for the FTC. So if you did know that there was a problem with a promotional code from your customer service AI, or you did know that a particular offer was causing confusion, and then you did nothing about it, there's a very stark record that's sitting there. And the FTC is looking to get that kind of data in their investigations.
So I want to dive in here a little bit and understand where these risks lie. So I'll go with the really basic one. If I run a fashion e-commerce brand and I have men's and women's clothes, I segment based on men and women and serve, the male fashion to the men and the female fashion ad to the woman. This probably doesn't present a risk to me. When does that become, when does it become discrimination? And how do we avoid discriminating against one segment or the other? I might prefer to advertise towards the female segment of my audience because I make more money off of that, just like throwing that out there randomly. But is that discrimination? When does it hurt people, and when does it really become?
I don't think that in and of itself is discrimination, but if you are, let's say, presenting an offer, let's say, for example, you're offering, some kind of auto renewal subscription, but based on the data you have in the algorithms, that certain segments of the population are less likely to pay, or that you won't be able to auto renew because the credit cards aren't that, they tend to be less valid, and so you don't make the same offers, you don't give the same opportunities to certain segments when there's not really a business reason to do it. That's the kind of thing that the FTC is going to look at.
So, pricing discrimination based on gender, race, or age would be a big no-no. I advise for a price testing tool. So this is important stuff. But they don't do that, like real split data, that kind of thing, segmentation data, and that's kind of one of the reasons why, is because it's kind of a relatively frowned upon practice. But I could absolutely see people abusing it in this way. The wealthy people pay more. If you know the segments of wealthy versus not wealthy, you might try and target them with the same product at a higher price point. Since when we're talking about online, you can change the price on the page, based on that user and stuff like that.
Or you may not make certain offers to certain underserved segments of the population either, and that would be the kind of thing that the FTC would be very interested in.
And you're saying that by collecting this data, which Shai is now doing in mass from customer service and trying to apply AI to, it actually opens you up to liability if there's evidence that you've been misusing, or I suppose it's actual discrimination is the right way to say it.
So that's one piece of it, but the other piece that we're seeing, so we're involved right now in several cases involving digital advertising and particularly targeted marketing. And, some of this data, it can be a real blessing because it's obviously helping you more efficiently advertise and provide products that consumers are likely to be more interested in. But we're seeing the FTC now subpoenaing a lot of this, a lot of the data that's being collected. So how many people, if you had a link to additional details, how many people clicked on the link? If you had certain disclosures, how much time, did people spend on the page looking at those disclosures? So this data is allowing the FTC to look in a way that they've never had the ability to look at before at how consumers are interacting online, and they are drawing conclusions. Sometimes I think they're not reasonable conclusions, but they're drawing conclusions from this data about consumer interaction and understanding of what's being presented to them online.
Does this mean that what some of the risk of like applied customer service AI is there some sort of personal privacy, like expectation of privacy when I'm talking to a customer service rep? And are there additional permissions that we need to be thinking about getting?
Yeah, absolutely. So if for example, you are collecting marketing data or other, sensitive data, let's say, for example, you're using AI to, for, some audio recognition and some, elements of, the consumer's voice that indicate
sentiment. Yeah. Like, are they happy or are they not happy?
Exactly. I mean, it's done with facial recognition as well, but in a call center, it's going to be audio recognition. And you use that data for marketing purposes. The FTC has specifically said in the guidelines that needs to be disclosed, because a consumer who's calling up to, complain about a product or service is not likely to understand that at the same time you're collecting that data in the background about them. So the disclosure of what you're collecting in those situations is going to be extremely important.
Shai, how are you handling this?
Well, we're not applying AI and CS in this way right now. We're thinking about the obviously the implications that are being talked about right now in deciding whether that level of conversational analytics with AI is something we would want to go after. I think there's tremendous benefits to the customer if you make the disclosures that you have to make. I think there's a very fine line, which is very ambiguous from a legal standpoint, in my opinion, because if you take it out of the customer service realm, I mean, if you make it completely anonymous and the data is just simply a representation to your attribution, it has nothing to do with a direct customer, then I think that's a way to go. We're using AI mostly in our KPI setting platform for our clients, but we're not using it in conversational analytics. I think the problem with the conversational analytics setting is exactly what we're talking about, in the sense of not making the disclosures necessary in order to use the data from that conversation for marketing purposes. Just like we make disclosures for using the recordings for quality assurance purposes, we're going to have to do it for marketing now that this entire realm of possibilities opened up. But I mean, this is probably a question for Linda, but it seems like marketing is heading towards, or at least AI is creating these ultra segmentations, right? Where we might see in the future something down to the user level where every single advertisement, let's say on Facebook, is automatically modified for the specific user it's targeting. No longer a segment, but the user. There might be a shampoo brand that is being advertised, and it picks up on who the user is, and it might be, let's say, Linda, and it might show Linda's face using that shampoo, and she'll see it, and it'll grab the corner of her eye because she'll see herself in the advertisement. This level of segmentation is no longer, it's down to the level of the individual, right? There's no segment. So that's a really crazy thing to think about, but it's something that we have to start conceptualizing, because what is the difference between these like very niche groups and segments that sometimes are very difficult to describe, right? In marketing, we think about segments, and there are tons of variables in attributing something to a segment, right?
Yeah.
It's not only race, it's not only gender, it's not only age, it's not only like certain things that they like. These audiences are built, you know, more constantly. They're getting more segmented and more hyper personalized, where it's going to become down, it's going to go down to the user level. So what if let's say we lived in a marketing world where the segment is the user in itself, and all their neuropsychological behavior is taken into account to market to them, and their specific likes and the photos that these platforms have being, that these users have fed into these platforms for 20 years is being used to market to them. Like, what would that look like from a legal standpoint? Because it's discriminatory for the individual. Like, it's just a, it's an important question, I think.
Yeah,
It's the Minority Report question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know that the issue there would necessarily be discriminatory, although it could. I think that's more likely to happen with audience segments. I think the real issue there is going to be the privacy issues. And,
right.
I think we're going to probably, the FTC has already said that if marketers are collecting data that they are going to include in algorithms, the consumer should be told that. And that's a relatively easy thing to do in your privacy policy.
Absolutely.
But if you start to get down to this level of hyper-personalization, and I think that is where we're headed, I could see a scenario where the FTC would say it's got to be a more heightened notice and consent, and maybe I think the industry maybe will want to come up with some framework similar to the ad choices framework, where consumers consent to that level of collection and that level of targeting. And I would say that if the industry, it is always better for the industry to come up with self-regulatory tools than to wait for the FTC to do it.
It seems a little dangerous and impractical, right? Isn't there always going to be a bad actor out there?
Yeah, there'll always be a bad
lack
actor.
of incentives, right, to go through self-regulation. It's just it works against the incentives that a lot of people in any industry have.
Right.
There's very few industries where the people that are benefited by this lack of regulation will want to pursue the regulation in itself.
But I think the reality is that, I don't think this is a tomorrow issue, but I think it's not in the too distant future, that if the industry doesn't think about, some standards or whatever, I think the FTC will come in.
I agree with you.
And regulate itself.
I love it. I feel like we could go deeper on this, but I want to move on because Tim, you've been waiting patiently for us. Tim, let's talk a little bit about analytics and what you've been up to at DFO. Where do you see, or where have you seen in DFO the biggest opportunities for applying AI for your company specifically, and then maybe even how that might apply more broadly across e-commerce?
Yeah, sure. I would say the vast majority of our focus right now is really about compatibility and integration. A lot of people in the space use a lot of the same software. I mean, I keep saying Shopify. I don't necessarily mean to pick it out. There's BigCommerce, there's WooCommerce, there's all kinds of commerce. But for us, like, we work with a lot of clients, and we also want to provide the ability to democratize AI. So a lot of the opportunities we're looking for are the broad scope use cases that exist in most businesses. Although we do have kind of our own projects, and I can talk about those as well. For the broad case scope of work, for us with AI, what we're really looking at is one aspect of customer service. How can we use automation, a combination of automation and machine learning, in order to generate content response for customer service issues? We found internally that most of the clients we work with, almost 3/4 of all use cases or all tickets basically end on the first contact. So that to us represents a huge opportunity, not just for ourselves, but also for our clients, in order to really cut down costs, but also improve customer satisfaction. In our experience, there's nothing that annoys a customer more than having to wait for someone to reply to them. Obviously, there's a lot of challenges that go along with chatbots and other such software, and I know we're going to dig into that, so I'm not going to touch upon it too much. But nevertheless, that's a big use case for us right now. We've looked into prediction use cases. Now, these ones are using the data we have to optimize kind of internal procedures. So, for example, risk assessment is a huge one right now, all across the space, and it's been around for decades. Fraud detection is a big one, obviously. Everyone, to some degree, should be using a fraud tool. But identifying the risk score for potential customers or even existing customers, identifying the level of customer satisfaction that exists, so that we can try to save the sale, so to speak, or provide the customer some sort of customized offer for the issues that they're having. Advertising, big space. Like I said before, everyone who is online is using some sort of algorithm for advertising. Facebook, I'm going to use as an example here. If you're advertising on Facebook, you're using AI, whether you know it or not. Obviously, with first-party data and a lot of the iOS changes and such things like this, now Facebook's relying on what data you provide it, and it provides specific guidelines for that, and every travel platform is doing that right now. But even from that standpoint, I mean, now natural language processing is in such a stage where you can use it for advertising. You can use it to generate content.
Right.
And this is very exciting for us. We use it in our split testing. It's become less and less complex. To
You're
the point
split
where
testing a page that your team member wrote versus a page that AI wrote?
Yeah,
Who's winning?
That's always a fun one. That one creates a little bit of competition, which I love. And look, a lot of the time, what we found is that AI doesn't necessarily make better copy than a good copywriter, but the fact that it can get close is itself amazing. Because now, instead of having, 12 copywriters all typing kind of the same stuff, if you're finding content that's really working, feed that to your model. There's a very famous saying, garbage in, garbage out. So obviously don't put garbage in, and you're gonna come up with some really interesting stuff. And this is really not, incredibly specific use cases. Obviously, segmentation, personalization are things. I don't necessarily see them as always being AI. So, for example, if you're doing remarketing, most people will say in your subject line, "Hey Tim, this is our offer for today." Is that AI? No, it's not. It's just a user variable, right? So, like if you're sending maybe specific offers to specific segments of people, that certainly comes into play. But a lot of people, when they're talking about applications like that right now, are maybe not hyper personalized. But what you're doing is you're clustering segments of customers according to certain data points, and you're trying to kind of figure out what offer is best suited for them. The challenge there is you don't want to offer, discounts to certain groups versus other groups necessarily. There's a lot of different things you can do there, right? I mean, even like for us, it's really just personalization of content. It's the words that are being said. It's what is marketing but appealing to a customer's problem and trying to find a solution, right? Yeah. That's what we're really focused on the marketing side. How do we find out what the customer's intent is, and how do we provide a solution in a more efficient way?
Tim, I want you to walk me through a specific situation where you and the team decided to build analytics platform or use AI, and then upon applying it, you go, "Oh my God, look at what we've discovered! This is gold." Like, give me your biggest win through applying AI within all that data at DFO.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I'm going to start this off with a preface. The best AI models I've seen involve some sort of form of expert opinion.
Really?
And this is actually very common in stock trading, where a lot of the AI models that Shai was mentioning, they involve a huge component of expert opinion. So you get very different results depending on who your team is. So for example, when we were looking at this chargeback use case, one thing we were really curious about is we know from a descriptive standpoint what we think causes chargebacks, right? Like correlations, causations, all that good stuff. What we found was it wasn't necessarily it wasn't necessarily using variables that we weren't expecting. What was happening was it was using less variables than what we were doing, right? So what that was kind of an exciting realization to us, because it's basically boiling down what you should be focusing on, as opposed to this wide variety of things that people usually go about when it comes to descriptive, right? I think with AI, like a lot of the wins that you see isn't necessarily like, in a very specific sample, I don't think I can do a better job than this. Usually, in a very specific sample you can. But what's exciting is the fact that you can use that scale, and the fact that it's a bit simpler once you deploy it than actually doing it yourself.
That's interesting. Wow, that's such an interesting learning. By the way, if you're listening, you might have had a few moments of question, you want some clarity, ask your questions in the chat. We've only got a few minutes left before we have to wrap up, but I'd love to answer your questions specifically for you. Linda, what Tim's talking about, this did sound a little risky, custom offers. Any legal concerns over that?
Again, I mean, I don't think we can get to a point where we say you can't have custom offers. But I think the thing to focus on now, and it may be involving outside audits or outside experts, is to just ensure that those offers, they have a valid business purpose, but they're not inadvertently creating some kind of discrimination against consumers based on their race, sex, color, etc. So I think that's going to come more into play with pricing offers, with credit offers, and things like that. As I don't worry about it in terms of the particular products or services you're selling, or necessarily even the marketing messages that go along with those, unless, for example, you found, the FTC is also very focused now on something they call dark patterns, which is devices and techniques in online e-commerce that they believe mislead consumers. So for example, if you used a certain checkout mechanism that you used for people who were older or less educated than you used for more sophisticated consumers based on demographic information, that's the kind of thing I think the FTC is going to be looking at.
And it sounds like this is also something, I mean, it's kind of hard for the FTC to see this, isn't it? Inside, at least the medium, like they don't look at DFO every single day, right? They're not in your data every day. They don't know how you're coming up with the answers to your questions. I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong or nefarious, but like, how does the FTC, how do they actually, like they have to do a full audit, right? So you have to, there's just the risk of audit increases as maybe complaints or issues of these types of practices might become more apparent to them.
I think that's right, and I think unfortunately they don't necessarily do the kind of scientific analysis they're asking the marketers to do to make sure there's no bias. They draw conclusions from results. So
right.
they'll look at something, and if, for example, when they did their workshop on dark patterns, they concluded that any website that had a higher response rate had more prevalent dark patterns than not. But
so just by having a good conversion rate, we're in trouble?
In a way, you then go on the defensive that no, this is converting better because it's a better product, it's a better value,
better
it's
copywriting, better whatever.
But you're on your heels then defending yourself.
I see.
Wow.
This is a big risk.
So I don't want people to take away the message that they shouldn't use AI or they shouldn't leverage AI as much as possible to make their business run more efficiently and provide a better customer experience. I just want to make people aware of where some of these sensitivities are. And if I had to pick two things, I would say it's the potential bias and the privacy and data security issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Good place to end that. Shai, you have a final thought on that?
Well, I mean, thank God my landing pages are converting below average. So that's that's a note that's a good note to end on. No, I mean, I understand. I think what Linda's bringing up is absolutely crucial for every marketer and advertiser to understand. And sometimes I think a good realization is the fact that the FTC is not looking at this from a scientific perspective or what they're not going to be able to analyze what the AI is doing completely. It's just like what results are coming out of that, out of this new tool that is extremely powerful. So I think as long as we use AI to make our experience for the customers better, and we're very, very aware of these potential downsides that we might have, I think we'll be in great place. I think it's also the fact that we're the ones that are controlling the AI to a very large extent, and we're the ones that have to make the ethical decisions between what the AI is doing and what it is not doing. So I think that's something that we all have to do regardless of what tool we're using. AI is simply a new tool that we have to apply this thought processing to. It is much more powerful. It is much more sophisticated, but we can still, constrain what it is supposed to do. So I think that the potential for marketers and advertisers is huge. I think that the majority of applications are, as far as advertising goes right now, are pretty much harmless, like copywriting, split testing, and things like that, and can be extremely beneficial. But I think the future that we're looking at over the next 15, 20 years is going to close in on that gap between what the potential huge benefits of AI are and what the potential downsides for the customers are, because we examine some potential benefits with AI. So it's a double-edged sword. I think it's something to keep in mind for sure.
I think I'm glad that we're discussing it today while we consider AI relatively in its infancy, as opposed to some of the things that have rolled out in the past with data concerns, social media prevalence, and then it having to become a big crunch as far as how data is shared because the government kind of wasn't prepared for that kind of data level. All right, we've only got a few minutes left. I want to bring Thomas on here because we've got a few great questions from the audience that we definitely want to address. Come on in.
Guys, great job so far. Wonderful stuff. Very, very thought-provoking. One of the first questions that came in, and I'm going to kind of tweak it just a little bit, just because I think you guys touched on a lot of it, but maybe if each of you could give a quick, down and dirty definition of what you think AI is.
Tim.
Go ahead. Anyone you want to
I feel like you've got to do this because you're building it right now. So.
Yeah, look, like if we're talking classical definitions, none of what we've talked about is what I consider to be AI. Like that's just the reality of it. I mean, when people really use the term AI, in my opinion, they're saying machine learning. And some automation, but I don't want to bore anyone with that. What do I define as AI? See, this is where it gets really tricky. Like if you make something that's incredibly advanced and can react to stimuli, right? Can react to stimuli in a genuine way. Arguably, you could say that is AI, right? That is what AI would be to me. Something that's fairly independent and just absorbs incoming stimuli. But you could also say machine learning is that. What is machine learning but taking data and basically putting it through if-then rules, which look like decisions to us, right? A list of if-then rules. So if I was to describe AI versus machine learning is we're defining the if-then rules. We're feeding more data so that I can create more if-then rules. But with AI, it's less about the targeted data flow, because really with machine learning, it's going to be as good as it gets based on what you're giving it. But the ability to bring in other stimuli and really kind of comprehend from there, right? Like if we're talking a thinking machine.
Yeah.
Interesting. Shai?
I would say it is, and this is going to be bold and largely philosophical, okay? I just want to warn everybody in the audience. I would say it's the invention of artificial consciousness. So the fact that we have developed a tool where, you know, something that is not human can be conscious about the decisions that it's going to make, and we no longer have to specify what it has to do, but now it can specify what it wants to do, and it thinks is right. So that ability of interpretation has not existed in computers before, and that's the big difference with AI. It's the ability to interpret data and to make a decision. And that goes beyond what just being intelligent is, because you can make an algorithm, and somebody might say that algorithm is pretty smart, but they wouldn't say that algorithm is pretty conscious. Does that make sense? So the difference between intelligence and consciousness is a big one with AI.
Yeah, artificial special intelligence is the first step, which you could say self-driving cars seem to have some form of that without being fully conscious. It's we can have a whole philosophical debate on
self-driving cars are the next advertising platform, just so everybody knows.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. Could be true. Linda, your thoughts on what is it that makes AI?
So from my perspective, it's the collection of massive amounts of data, and then the development of algorithms or predictions that allow various decisions to be made. And it really is a mechanism to combine massive amounts of data collected from, massive sources, multiple sources, and combine those in order to develop predictable outcomes that allowed marketers to make decisions.
I like that a lot. What was I going to say? I think that's what we're talking about when we're having this conversation today. Shai is talking about what could be a separate call on philosophical debate of the emergence of artificial general intelligence.
It's the next webinar.
Yeah, and Tim is talking about how basically we're abusing the term AI, and it's really all ML is what it is today for the most part. So I think this ties it up nicely. My vote is with Linda as it pertains to the conversation today. Not that anyone asked my opinion as the moderator. I know we're over time. Can you guys stick around? Should we try and answer one more question, or Thomas, do we need to end it?
Yeah, no, I think we started a couple minutes late.
Sure.
So for the folks who are still here, we might as well get a couple more questions in if we can.
Yeah, let's do it.
Here's a good opener question as well. For a marketer that's new to using this type of technology, whether we're going to call it AI or machine learning or whatever we're going to call it, can you make a recommendation for the best way to get started?
Ooh, yeah.
Maybe
Tim,
maybe a better way to put that is like an entry point, I feel like, right?
Yeah, sure. I think the easiest way to really get started is most people are going to be advertising on a platform, Facebook, Google, whatever. Make sure you really read the instructions and you send it the data it's asking for. I know it sounds really simple. I see a ton of people day by day who do not do that. Especially, for example, with Facebook's conversion API, they'll just send the Facebook click ID. They won't send the first name. They won't send the last name. They won't send the zip code. They won't send the phone number. I mean, look, the algorithms in those platforms are going to be as good as the data you give it. The benefit of using it instead of building it is they tell you what data you want.
Yeah, absolutely.
So fill out all the check boxes you can, and you're going to put yourself in the best position for success just in that.
And so even before it's applying AI, it's about collecting and organizing the data and just being well organized in your department to send the right data in.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shai, I'm sure you're seeing this now in your day to day.
Yeah, I mean the recommendation I wanted to give is actually just a little bit. It's no longer on the data side; it's on the application side, which is I would just make a list of like the major activities I have in promoting my brand. If it's a marketer for an agency or whatever, like the list of activities that I do. Maybe a part of your day is copywriting. Maybe a part of your day is like scheming and plotting about strategies that you have. Maybe if you segregate them and then you try to research tools that exist that are affordable, because there's a ton of them that you can use to replace some of those activities. I think that's an awesome starting point. That's why I mentioned copywriting so much, because nowadays there's so many copywriting AIs. It's like Jarvis and conversational AI, and they're pretty good. Like it's going to free up a lot of time so that you can do other things. So I think that's a really applicable advice. Yeah.
I'll add video editing AI is out there as well. That's streamlining that content, create the video content, especially for Facebook, Instagram, but also other channels. It can be created in seconds instead of having one person have to move around image blocks and 30-second scenes and all that stuff. Linda, let's go to you.
Linda, you there?
Oh.
The best place to start when
I'm sorry, I had myself on mute.
Right.
No worries.
I think I can't speak to the business aspects of it, but I guess if you're starting out, I would make sure one, that you do really strong due diligence on the third parties or the vendors that you're working with. And I would make sure also that you know what is being done with the data that you're providing, because you're obviously going to be providing your data to go into these algorithms, and if that data is going to be used in ways that may not be secure or may not have been covered by your privacy policies, that could create some problems.
Right.
Absolutely. As I'm creating what will eventually have layered artificial intelligence in it, we're collecting unique data points on merchants that we've never done before, which I think brings up this ethical implication, in the sense that the same way that Facebook users didn't understand how valuable it was to post their location and updates and their sentiments, and then Facebook started gathering a lot of data. Merchants don't necessarily, in this case for us, know how valuable their tech stack data is, and we'll be one of the first places to collect that data. And so I think about this a lot, which is like, how do I maybe give back to the merchant the value that they're providing when they give me this information? How do I make it an equal exchange, so that I'm not just sucking data out of them and then feeding, I don't know, some third party or selling that data to vendors.
Right.
That's my own concern on it.
Yeah. We'll close with one last question. This one's for Linda specifically. Linda, do you have any input on where the line is being drawn? There's a couple examples here. For example, Apple's on the FCC's radar because the Apple Card approval process uses typical credit rating decisions, and it's been shown to be less than perfect. A husband and wife with shared income got different credit limits, for example. What if a merchant inadvertently charges more for shipping to customer X because FedEx charges more because they decide there's risk in delivering to that address based on AI? Is the merchant going to get in trouble? Those are just a couple examples. Is there a line being drawn yet that's clear yet, Linda?
So I don't think that there are clear lines yet. I mean, this is really just beginning to evolve, but just from the example you gave, I think that those are both excellent examples of areas where there are different offers or decisions being made, and they're being made on the basis of demographics that fall into protected classes. So I think those are exactly kinds of things the FTC is looking at. I should also mention that when you're talking about credit, in addition just to the FTC's general authority under Section 5, there is the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and the use of algorithms that might result in discriminatory practices with respect to the extension of credit would be a direct violation of the Fair Credit Reporting Act. So that's not new. It's just that it may be more pervasive now as a result of the use of AI. With respect to, you know, a company charging more for shipping than based on the neighborhood, I think it's the shipper that would be primarily liable, but I could see a scenario as the FTC continues to expand its net of liability where they might say, if the marketer knew that that's what the shipping company was doing, then maybe they shouldn't be doing business with them.
Yeah.
So true.
All right. Well, I think that's it. Derric, you have anything that you'd like to wrap up with?
No, I think this is a perfect way to end it. We have some real life examples. We've got the back of the head idea of where this is really all heading to the future of consciousness in AI. And then I think we have some next steps for smaller brands, for medium brands and larger brands can all be thinking about protecting themselves while simultaneously making large investments in furthering the business.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Linda, Shai, Tim, Derric. Wonderful, wonderful stuff, and we really appreciate it. Your next opportunity to attend a PDMI event live online is our next episode of Take 20, our 20-minute webinar series created by our Brand Response Council, which will air live tomorrow at 2 o'clock Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. You can visit thepdmi.com/take-20 to check out the upcoming schedule. And the Workshop Council's next monthly seminar series event is slated for mid-September. We'll be announcing that soon, so keep an eye on our social media, on your email, and we'll be getting that out to you here in the near future. Of course, we also continue to look forward to once again meeting in person at PDMI West, October 4th through 6th in San Diego. Just yesterday, we were thrilled to announce our keynote speaker, Army veteran, burn survivor, and Dancing with the Stars champion, J.R. Martinez. So we look forward to seeing you there. Registration is moving, rooms are moving. Visit thepdmi.com/PDMI-West for more information and register today. Again, thank you to this wonderful group. Thank you for joining us today. Be safe and be well. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks. Bye-bye.